The First World War that erupted in 1914 was the most costly and destructive war in history up until then. Before the 4 years of bloodletting were to end, 37 million people had been killed. About 40 years prior to 1914, Charles Taze Russell began to build anticipation for the year. By means of chronological calculations, the Bible students in the Watchtower expected a 2,520-year period would conclude in 1914, and the world would be thrown into chaos, followed soon afterwards by the War of Armageddon. In the decades since then, the Watchtower has reinterpreted prophecy. Now Jehovah's Witnesses believe that 1914 was merely the beginning of the rule of God's kingdom, and it was the end of the appointed times of the nations. But that gives rise to the question, what are the appointed times of the nations, or the times of the Gentiles, as some translations phrase it? Did the prophetic period of the appointed times of the nations begin in 607 BCE with the destruction of Jerusalem by the Chaldeans, as Jehovah's Witnesses believe? Well, consider the context of Jesus' remarks. Woe to the pregnant woman and the one suckling a baby in those days, for there will be great necessity upon the land and wrath on this people, and they will fall by the edge of the sword, and be led captive into all the nations. And Jerusalem will be trampled on by the nations, until the appointed times of the nations are fulfilled. Jesus was foretelling the future destruction of Jerusalem, which actually occurred in the year 70 CE, which is commemorated on the Arch of Titus in Rome. Jesus' disciples had asked him for a sign as to when the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem would occur. It is inconceivable that they would have understood Jesus to have been referring to the destruction of Jerusalem that had taken place 5 centuries earlier. They wanted to know the future, not the past. Not insignificantly, the 11th chapter of Revelation, which was written after Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans, foretells that the nations will trample the holy city for a period of 1,260 days, or 3.5 years. This prophetic period is the appointed times of the nations. The holy city, which is destined to be trampled by the nations, is connected with the Christian congregation, of which Jesus is high priest. As the temple and city of Jerusalem had once been the place where Jehovah placed his name, the Watchtower and Jehovah's Witnesses serve a similar function today. In conclusion, not only have the appointed times of the nations not ended, they have not even begun. Jehovah's future judgments call for the nations to be thrown into tumult at the coming of Christ, and for his people to be dominated for the appointed times of the nations. Afterwards, the nations will be destroyed.